This is Ethan, and I'm here with Dave, and together we are Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 45-inch.
On this week's episode, we conclude our discussion to determine the definitive top 5 Weird Al Yankovic album cover art with artist and illustrator Kelly Phillips.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Seriously, the whole podcast is about Weird Al.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
You don't have to listen, but we're glad you are.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
On last week's episode, we sat down with one of our favorite artists, Kelly Phillips, and the timing could not have been any better, as she is the artist behind the beautiful cover art to the new book by Lily Hirsch, Weird Al Seriously. It's coming out on March 15th. Plus, she designed that awesome caricature of Ethan and myself.
March 15th, that's only a few short days away.
That's right, I'm so excited. And if you remember, with Kelly, we recorded one of our patent-pending definitive top 5 lists, the top 5 Weird Al Yankovic album cover arts.
And last week, we asked our listeners to send in their own top 5 lists.
We got some great lists. People were sending them to us on our Twitter account, on our Facebook group, even through private messages. One of our listeners, Kenneth, he sent in his list. Number 5, he had Alpocalypse. Number 4, Mandatory Fun. Number 3, Off the Deep End. Number 2, Dare to be Stupid. And number 1, Weird Al Yankovic. I wonder how that is going to pan out.
It's a great list, but I can't spoil it for everyone else. It could be our definitive top 5 list. It could be 100% the same. I will not confirm nor deny, Dave.
You know what's interesting? Another one of our listeners, at Father Beast on Twitter, he sent in a list, and his number 1 and his number 2 were the exact same number 1 and number 2 as Kenneth.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, his full list: number 5, Even Worse; number 4, Straight Outta Linwood; number 3, Poodle Hat; number 2, Dare to be Stupid; and number 1, Weird Al Yankovic.
Wow. All right, how about one more?
Okay, one more. All right, so our listener, Dakota, he sent in his list. Number 5, Running with Scissors. Number 4, Weird Al Yankovic. Number 3, Dare to be Stupid. Number 2, Alpocalypse. And number 1, Polka Party.
A lot of common themes in those, and I won't ruin any surprises about what we have in our personal top 5 lists, and of course, the definitive top 5 list.
Yeah, it's really interesting, to see everyone's top 5 list because, there were some common themes in there, but there were some ones that in there that I was a little surprised to see, where they were ranked. But hey, this is all people's personal opinion, so I'm not going to say, I wouldn't put that there, I wouldn't put that there. I'm going to save that for the rest of this episode where I do get to do a lot of that.
Of course, part 1 of our discussion is on episode 44-inch. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, you probably should, as this one will make a whole lot more sense. But in case you didn't...
Previously on Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast...
You could help us with one of our fan favorite Weird Al top 5s. Instead of going through an album song by song, we would look at the albums themselves and actually look at the cover art from the albums.
We must come up with a definitive top 5 list that we all agree upon. Just the cover, the first thing you see when you look at an album. And we've decided to only focus on Weird Al's 14 studio albums.
For Alpalooza, we are considering just the original red version.
It's pretty obvious she's got to take Jennifer to the prom.
Are you even thinking about Dylan's feelings?
I really think that Brenda should just choose Brenda for a while.
My number 5, Poodle Hat.
My number 5 is Alpalooza.
My number 5, Bad Hair Day.
David, did you find my Metamucil?
I'm not feeling too good.
Who is this? Is this my grandson?
My number 4 was Alapalooza.
Bad Hair Day is mine. Number 4.
My number 4 is the self-titled Weird Al Yankovic.
I'm not wearing underwear.
My lawyer's gonna love this.
All right, so let's move on. Ethan, what is your number 3?
So my number 3 was already mentioned. My number 3 is Bad Hair Day.
Oh, excellent choice.
Okay, we're staying in the family so far.
Yeah, so both of yours were 4 and 5 for Bad Hair Day, so I feel like
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There's a good chance that it'll make the top 5 when we discuss, but I guess we'll have to wait to find out.
Okay, Kelly, what was your number 3?
My number 3 is Alpocalypse. So where we were complaining that Poodle Hat looked a little photoshopped, I love how photoshopped Alpocalypse looks. I think this is like such a wild, ridiculous cover to have created. Like, I don't understand what the impetus was for this. There's nothing calling back to an alpocalypse or the impending, reign of death over the city. But this is just the most metal cover you could possibly create, and totally. I just love staring at it.
And there's these little details in the flames of skulls and fangs, and the cities are on fire and the letters are crumbling. And then if you look at the Al is the L is popped out more to really emphasize the Al apocalypse of it. It's so cool.
And he's just a cheerful little guy having a romp. Do we know which of the 4 horsemen he's supposed to be? I didn't actually analyze this.
Yeah, we do actually. I do. I don't know if you guys do, but I do.
Let's hear it, Dave.
Well, I can see is Death is one of them, right?
Right, so Death is the one all the way on the right, the pale horse.
Yeah. And I feel like War must be on the left.
Well, War is the red horse, typically.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and that is the skeleton holding the sword.
The metal skeleton.
Yeah. And
metal, very metal, rock on.
The horse all the way to the left, the white horse, that is generally Conquest or Pestilence.
Mm.
So that leaves one horse left, and that's the black horse, and that is usually Famine.
Mm-hmm. Does
And
this
Al
mark
actually,
when Al did not want to do food songs anymore?
that's exactly the reason why Al put himself as Famine, because he said it's attributed to all those songs that I did about food back in the 1980s.
I love it. It makes me love this cover even more.
It's so good. Yeah, this one is certainly on my list, ranked up higher since we haven't talked about 1 or 2 yet. But I can give you that preview that it is either 1 or 2 on my list.
Love it. Good.
This one didn't make my list. It did make the honorable mentions. And just to go back to your point, why is it called Alpocalypse? Well, it actually was a reference to all those, end of times predictions and doomsday prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
That was really popular back in 2011. There were quite a few really big ones. I feel like
2012 was the Mayan prediction.
Right, yeah. So I think that was just a reference to, the end of the world is coming. And basically that tied in nicely with, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse cover that Al did.
Can we also say that this is the 13th studio album, and 13 is seen as an unlucky number, so therefore the world is ending? Or maybe we could look at it as this is the second last Weird Al album thus far, and it was just kind of a prophecy saying hey, we're coming to the end.
We should have known.
All right, Dave, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is the iconic Off the Deep End album.
I'm ready to fight about this one.
Uh-oh.
I will say I love this cover, but it made my honorable mentions. Did not make my top 5.
It is not in contention for me.
Oh.
But I get it.
I think this is going to be a long night. I love about this cover is that it is a direct parody of the Nirvana album Nevermind. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, that is the one that has that naked baby in the water and he's following a dollar bill on a fishing line. If you look at that, put it up right next to Off the Deep End, Al is in the exact same pose as the baby. Of course, he's strategically placed, so he does not look like he's totally naked. But
well, he does look totally naked. We just can't see anything.
Right. He's strategically placed so that he looks like he's totally naked, but you just can't see anything. And of course, he's replacing the dollar bill with a donut.
It is such a cool album cover.
Yeah, of all the direct parody album covers, I do think this is a really, really good one. But I think the reason that it's good is also the reason why I don't like it as cover art, and it's that it's just a little off-putting.
I wonder if the same way that people were mistaking Al Palooza, people were, mistaking this for Nirvana.
I can only hope so.
All right, we're down to our top 2. Does anyone have a number 2 that has been said already?
No, mine has not been said yet.
Dave?
Nope. Neither my number 1 or my number 2 have been said yet.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay, well, because of that, let's let you go first, Dave, for our number 2.
My number 2, UHF original motion picture soundtrack and other stuff.
I had a really hard time with this one. I think this is one of my favorite images of Al, to the point where I also copied the eye motif when I did my first comic cover.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally disqualified it because I don't think this was an image made specifically for the cover art.
Whoa. Okay.
So I would have otherwise put this pretty high up, but I had to really soul search, and I decided that I was going to take this out of contention for myself, since it was originally the movie poster.
That is an excellent point, yeah.
But I also understand that that's how soundtracks work.
Yeah, I mean, it did not make my top 5 or honorable mentions. Not to say I don't love it. I mean, like we mentioned earlier, the UHF logo is where our 2000-inch logo takes inspiration. One thing that I never really noticed until more recently is how when you look at the TV for the F, the TV goes inside the screen for the H. And
Yep.
that's something where it took decades for me to notice, and now that I have noticed it, I can't unsee it, and something about it just kind of I can't enjoy the cover art because I have to think about it, and it's going into these different dimensions, and I just don't know if my mortal brain can comprehend that, let alone look at the rest of the artwork.
Some poor graphic designer got away with that since 1989, and you just pulled the rug out from under them.
Well, if you do look at our logo, the Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast logo, our logo does recreate that to be accurate, which that's where I first noticed it. And I was thinking, man, that must be a mistake. And then I looked at the UHF logo and I was like, wow, our artist did a great job.
And I think we've mentioned it before, but the artist for our 2000-inch logo, that is Heather Malone.
We talked a lot about body hair on this episode so far. I do want to point out on the UHF cover here, it looks like there is drawn on chest hair for Al. Do you guys agree that that's drawn on chest hair?
I also think it is, which means that it was a very deliberate choice. I'd be interested to know if that really sealed the deal when they were creating this image.
They're going back and forth with the art director, and they're like, it just needs something, and then they just
The bottom of this image could just have a little bit more warmth to it.
Well, I think you've hit most of my points. Obviously, I love the chestnut. No. I think you've hit most of my points. I mean, I do like this. Correct. It is the, same image that he used for the, movie itself, the movie posters and things like that. So I can kind of see your argument why you would disqualify it. For me, I'm looking at it and I just think that is such an iconic look of Al, is really kind of the last of his 1980s look. I know it is the last album in the 1980s, but, I kind of break his career into kind of an 80s career, and then it starts again with 92. He had a slightly different look. This is kind of the last of that. This is also the last album that was put out on vinyl up until Apocalypse did come out. So it, was kind of the last one to be seen, on a big, 12 by 12, image.
Yeah, I do think it's super iconic, and that's why I struggled the most with it. And maybe that was just me not wanting to have to rank it. So I'm ready to be swayed on this one.
All right.
Yeah, I only did 2 honorable mentions, but if I did 3 honorable mentions, this probably would be my number 3 on there. So I do love it. And just to argue with Kelly, sorry, Kelly.
Let's get into it.
If this wasn't the cover art, if it wasn't the same as the poster, that would be weird.
It would be weird.
Okay.
I understand
Okay,
that I
okay.
made a bold choice.
All right, Kelly, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is Polka Party.
Nice.
I absolutely love this cover. This is another one that when I got it finally on vinyl, I got to really appreciate the bedlam going on in the background.
Yes.
And I think when I first listened to Polka Party, I was obviously a child, and I've now been to punk shows, and I think just this is even funnier. I love every single person that was in this photo shoot, and I want to hug them all.
Yeah, their faces are really good, and their
Everyone
get-ups,
went
yeah.
100% all in on this photo shoot.
So if you are on the cover of this photo shoot and listening to this right now, please give us a call, 347 Spatula, and we will arrange for Kelly to give you a hug.
Yes.
It's amazing. I will say though, this did not make my list or my honorable mentions list, and it's so hard to say that for these that I love so much, but just didn't make the cut.
Yeah, I probably have the softest spot in general for Polka Party. I absolutely love it to pieces, but this cover really seals the deal for me.
You know, I had a hard time not putting this one on my honorable mention list, but ultimately I did not. I think that it is very underrated cover art. I think the album itself is underrated, but I think the cover art in particular is underrated. I think kind of what hurts it is that it looks a little bit too much like, it should belong in the polka section of the record store.
That's kind of what I love about it. I think the punks in the back are like a very insidious component to the image, where you don't initially see it. You just kind of see this like splatter text. You see Al in this absolutely wonderful lederhosen outfit, and then you're like, wait a minute, what's going on behind it? But I do agree. I think it has maybe it needed one or two extra elements to make it go even more over the top to really sell this concept.
All right, I'm gonna tell you my number 2. This has not been said yet, but my number 2 is Dare to Be Stupid. I love this cover. I love how bizarre it is, but I feel like it's just so Al. It's not trying to be something else. It's kind of like the originals. The ill-advised vanity tour where it's like, I'm just going to play my stuff, and I feel like this is his cover. It's not trying to be anything else. It is just Al. It's weird. There's a toothbrush on it. There's a Lego. There's a fish. There's a headphone cord. There's a golf ball. It's so weird, and I love it. It's so iconic to me.
Can we decide what the object in the top left corner is? I think I've spent my whole life trying to figure out what this is.
I didn't know that this was something to be discussed, but I've always assumed it was like a scientific model of a molecule. That's what I've always just assumed it is.
Yeah, I always thought it was a molecule as well.
It always gives me somewhere between like a brioche bun kind of vibe.
Of course, yeah.
But also like a lady in a thong.
Oh.
Several like bifurcated women.
Oh. Oh yeah, I never saw that before. I can't unsee it now.
Yeah, you're welcome. I did not have this on my list, and it pained me, but it is at the top of my honorable mentions. But I do agree with everything you're saying about how this is the first album where one of his originals really got to shine, and I love that this cover goes all in on being a tribute to probably one of the best originals that he's ever done.
Yeah.
But I did drop it, if only because, I don't know, I guess I just liked the other 5 better. I loved the Dare to Be Stupid cover.
That's fair.
See, now, all the reasons why you guys like this album cover art are the reasons why I don't really like this album cover art. The randomness of just these random things that have no relevance at all to any of the songs that are actually on this album. They're just like whatever's in my junk drawer, I'm just going to throw out there, and put it up there. I also don't like that fisheye lens. Al looks really creepy to me in this image. It's scary. And I do have a funny story actually about that image. Is when I first saw this album cover, I was with my cousin and he has the album on vinyl and he says, show me this. And he goes, you know what this guy on the cover, Al, he looks like my brother Mike. And then he goes, well, except my brother Mike has red hair. And my brother Mike doesn't wear glasses. And my brother Mike doesn't have a mustache. I said, he looks nothing like your brother Mike. So every time I see this, I think of my cousin Mike. And think how much Al does not look at all like him.
Now, Kelly, you were asking us about the top left. I'm wondering, what is this silver thing next to the toothbrush on the bottom?
That looks like a serving tray to me.
Oh yeah, like kind of a chips and dip kind of tray.
Yeah, that's the best guess I had. I didn't know if... Okay. I didn't know if I was missing something.
I guess first glance you kind of assume it's just a coin, but then it's definitely not a coin.
I think that makes my point though, is that there were two items on the front of this cover that you guys could not even identify.
Well, we have butts and a hubcap. I mean, what else do you need?
It's time to move on to number 1.
Okay. Does anyone have a number 1 that has not been said yet? Because we'll save that.
I have not said my number 1 yet.
Kelly?
Mine has been said.
Okay, mine has been said too. Why don't you go, Kelly?
So my number 1 is, and I'm sure you guys could have guessed it, the original self-titled Weird Al Yankovic album. This kind of drawing gives me anxiety to look at because I can't even imagine where you start or how much fiddling goes into it. It makes me exhausted just thinking about drawing something like this. So I think it's just deeply impressive, but also because of how relevant it is to all the songs on there, how there is that continued joke on the back. Every little detail in here is just so purposeful, so well executed. And I think it's just a really delightful image. And it even goes into the level of detail where in the letters, there's little faces of these kind of long-nosed, Mad TV looking characters in there. And I just love that there's not 1 inch of space wasted on this cover. It's chock full. It's super fun. It's really well made. I just love it.
So my number 1 has been said before, and it is Alpocalypse.
Nice.
I guess I already kind of cheerleadered it a little bit earlier, but it is just if I'm gonna hang something on my wall, this is what I want to hang on my wall. This is just, I love it. It's bright. The face of the guy on the left, was then taken and used for Bermuda's drum set, which was so cool. The lettering, the detail in the cities, everything about this, it's so cool. I just love it.
This really should be released as a giant poster to put on your wall.
It's funny that you say that because I actually do have on my wall a gigantic, I think it's 3 foot by 3 foot easily, poster of Alpocalypse.
Wow. And I hope it has all the creases and little thumbtack holes in it.
No, it's one of those, I think they call it a fat head, is where you can, take it off and move it around. It's actually in the hallway right as you enter my Weird Al room. So I know you've seen it, Ethan.
So did you acquire this or did you have this made?
No, this was part of a promotion for Alpocalypse when it was first coming out. You could buy posters in a whole bunch of different sizes. And one of the options they had was this gigantic fat head. And I'm probably the only person who bought it because, of course, I got to have everything for the collection.
I was going to say, who are you to not go all in?
But it is huge. There's really no wall in my house other than the hallway to my Weird Al room that's big enough to actually display this.
It's so awesome. I want that.
I mean, you can apparently. It comes right off and restitched.
Maybe I shouldn't have said it's removable because Ethan will be over here with a spatula trying to strip it off my wall.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to walk out of your house with a giant 3-foot banner.
You'll find a way. Life always finds a way.
All right. Well, I can't believe we have just one more album to name, and this is your number one, Dave. And apparently neither Kelly nor I have mentioned it so far.
I'm a little surprised that it didn't make either of your list, but we are talking about my favorite album cover of all time is Weird Al Yankovic in 3D.
I knew this was going to be your pick.
Because of your hand.
Why? Well, okay. Why did you know that this was going to be my pick?
Well, number one, it feels like a you album, but
Okay.
I say that in a nice way. But I mean, I did it to you. It's the arm, right?
I mean, outside of that amazing pose that Al is in and that wonderful, showing us his palm, that great span between the fingers, and how it was wonderfully recreated in my picture that you gratefully drew of us. There are a lot of just elements to this that I really like. I love the fact that, back in the, 1983, 1984 time frame, every single movie that was coming out was either in 3D or having to do that was their number one marketing thing that they were hammering home, that this movie's in 3D. It was either in the title or they were just you got to watch this movie in 3D. You had these, and it's not like the 3D movies that they have now. You had to put on these paper glasses, to actually watch these movies. And they were such a big, part of everything is that, people would, gather around the TV and invite friends over, and you would watch, Jaws in 3D, or Amityville 3D, or, Friday the 13th Part 3, in 3D. It was really perfect timing for Al to kind of, jump on this in 3D, bandwagon that was going on. Also do like that he actually, I don't know if I might be the only person who noticed this, but the actual font that he uses in this, it's very similar to the font that is in the Jaws 3D movie poster. So I think that, that font was kind of, based off of the movie poster. And I just kind of like the way that this is laid out. I also like the fact that I didn't know this until it went up for auction at one of the Alcons, but that shirt that he's wearing is not actually yellow. It's actually a white shirt, and they colored it yellow for the picture.
The yellow is a good choice as a Photoshop element.
Yeah.
Or a pre-Photoshop element.
Or they just got a highlighter and scribbled on it at that point.
Yeah, this is probably printed on a transparency with a yellow piece of paper under it.
Yeah, I mean, I love this artwork, but didn't make my top 5 or honorable mention list.
Yeah, the more that I was really scrutinizing this cover, because again, it's so iconic. I love this image. I jumped on buying that t-shirt as soon as it became available recently. Right. I just wish that it kind of went into the 3D element more. I wish he was wearing 3D glasses or something, because I'm kind of trying to piece together what the visual narrative of this is, and it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. There's a picture frame on some kind of picnic table, there's some pink clouds in the back, he's in outer space, he kind of looks oddly flat for this being about being in 3D, and I think it's because it was a black and white picture that got colorized, which is why his hair doesn't look as dark as the space. That's, that's the publisher and me noticing where absolute black is. So I'm this is a very clunky album cover to me, which is why I think I ultimately only made it an honorable mention.
There actually is, I know we're not talking about the backs of these albums, but on the back of the album, there is a woman wearing those 3D glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And
I also find that illustration very bizarre.
Yes.
That woman kind of creeps me out a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, she's not as creepy as Al on the Dare to Be Stupid cover. You got to admit that.
No, I'll argue for that. That lady is the creepiest.
And then on the back, too, I know we're not talking about the back, but you do finally get to see all the band members, holding their instrument of choice. Of course, Jim holding his guitar, Steve holding his axe, and Bermuda holding his blender.
Right. And Al holding his own hands. One thing that took me way, way, way too long to recognize is the name in 3D can be tied back to Nature Trail to Hell. that song. They say
Oh, wow.
in 3D, and
That went right over your head.
it went right over my head.
And this is why I'm going to be auditioning for a new co-host very soon.
So you noticed that the corner of the TV in the UHF logo overlapped, but not. I see.
I'm just going to note that for when we argue later.
When you have your annual reviews together.
All right, just for the folks at home, Kelly, can you give us your top 5 in order?
Sure. So I had number 5, Alapalooza. Number 4, Bad Hair Day. Number 3, Alpocalypse. Number 2, Polka Party. And number 1, Weird Al Yankovic.
And Dave, what is your top 5?
My top 5, starting at number 5, Bad Hair Day. Number 4, Alapalooza. Number 3, Off the Deep End. Number 2, UHF Original Motion Picture Soundtrack and other stuff. And number 1, Weird Al Yankovic in 3D.
And for the folks at home, my number 5 was Poodle Hat. Number 4 was Weird Al Yankovic. Number 3 was Bad Hair Day. Number 2 was Dare to Be Stupid. And number 1 was Alpocalypse. Wow, we are so different. How did that happen?
I think one of the reasons why we're so different is just because these album covers have so much to look at and so much to bring in and so many ways that you can look at them that something is going to connect to somebody on a different album cover than it is for you. And I think that that's really just kind of the beauty of Al's album covers is that they're not just, here's what this album is. There's actual true artwork on these albums.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Art is about interpretation, but there is a right and a wrong in this scenario.
I don't know how we're going to do. I mean,
Well, where did we have overlap?
the one album cover that all 3 of us had in common was Bad Hair Day. Dave, you had it at number 5. Kelly, you had it at number 4. And then I had it at number 3. So none of us had it as our top 1 or 2, but it is one that we agree collectively belongs in the top 5.
I would agree it belongs in the top 5, absolutely.
Because all 3 of us put it, is there an argument to make it our number 1?
I don't know if I would. I think even though we all have it, I don't know if I would put it as my number 1. So I don't know if it then is a number 1 worthy slot.
Okay. So we know it's on the list.
I think it belongs in that kind of like middle to bottom range that we all put
Right.
it in.
Okay. So that doesn't help us. Let's see. So Kelly, you had Weird Al Yankovic as your number 1. I had it as my number 4. And Dave, you didn't have it on your list.
No, I did not have it on my
Yeah,
list.
Dave, what's wrong with you?
So the 3 of us had Bad Hair Day, but we ranked it a little bit lower. But my number 1 was Alpocalypse. Kelly, your number 3 was Alpocalypse. Dave, it wasn't on your list. But Kelly, maybe you and I can champion for somewhere in the top 3, maybe number 1, is Alpocalypse.
Yeah, I think Alpocalypse needs to be there somewhere.
What do you think, Dave?
And Dave, if it wasn't on your list, you do have a 3x3 foot version of it on your wall. So I feel like in your heart, if you truly look inside, it belongs on the list.
I will say that I did have a hard time picking number 5. I think number 1 through 4 for me was pretty solid, but number 5 I did constantly, flip between it could be this one, it could be that one, it could be this one. I do feel like Alpocalypse is great artwork, and there's no arguing with that. It's just so detailed, and just the reference, to the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and just everything about it was very well thought out. I thought the photographer did a wonderful job. Al's expression just it's just like the exact opposite of what you'd expect from a Horseman of the Apocalypse. So I'm willing to put Alpocalypse on the list.
Woohoo, 1 win.
Okay, so because you're willing to make that concession, Dave, both of you had Alapalooza on your list. I did not have it on mine. I am willing to allow it on the top 5 list. Alapalooza.
Okay. I mean,
Good.
I
Great.
can't
We're
argue
winning
with that.
both times.
So just to look at everything though, that means Alpocalypse, Bad Hair Day, and Alapalooza are on our top 5 list. So we need to start figuring out what's going where, and we have to figure out what these final 2 album covers are going to be for the top 5.
Well, I will say, of those 3, I have them ranked next to each other on my list. So I had Alpocalypse as 3, Bad Hair Day as 4, and Alapalooza as 5. And I'm pretty convinced that that's a good ranking for those 3 albums. Not necessarily those numbers, but that order.
See, I would argue that Alapalooza is a little more iconic than Bad Hair Day.
I could be talked into that.
Okay, what do I need to do to talk you into that?
Well, okay, so let's talk about this though. How strongly do we feel about our number ones? Alpocalypse is my number 1, so obviously I feel like it should be above both of those.
I feel like if the self-titled Weird Al Yankovic album doesn't make it on the list, that you guys are going to be truly contorting yourselves when I draw the back version of your caricature. We've proven my witchcraft is real, so take that as you will.
Just think of the years of physical therapy we're going to need, Ethan, if she draws us.
That's true.
Again.
Yeah, but who's going to take a picture behind us? That's what we need to remember.
You never know what's behind you guys.
This is tough. Okay, so
I'm willing to put Alpocalypse up ahead of the list, but only if I get Alapalooza immediately following it before Bad Hair Day.
I would be okay with that.
I like how we're horse trading, but we haven't decided where on the list these are going.
Somewhere on the list, we have Alpocalypse, followed by Alapalooza, followed by Bad Hair Day. We just don't know where yet.
But things could be between them, but just overall, that order is what we're agreeing on.
This is progress, guys. This is progress.
Okay, let's go through some of the ones that were solos. So, Dave, you had In 3D on your list, and that was a solo. Kelly, you had Polka Party on your list. That was a solo. And I had Poodle Hat on my list, and Dare to Be Stupid, which were both solos.
I would say all 3 of those are my honorable mentions.
I cannot put Dare to Be Stupid on the list. Just that cover freaks me out too much.
Well, so Dave, you also had Off the Deep End as a solo, and you had UHF as a solo. So your top 3 are all solos.
Dave's list was crazy.
Kelly, we can vote him out.
Ooh, okay.
How hairy are my arms now, Kelly?
I think we're going to talk more when we get to the self-titled album then.
I mean, I am pushing for self-titled to be on the top 5.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a must.
But Dave, if we put self-titled on there, that means only one of In 3D, Off the Deep End, or UHF will make the list.
Yeah, I know that, Kelly, you had a big problem with Off the Deep End. Ethan, what are your thoughts about Off the Deep End?
I like Off the Deep End. I think it's funny. I think it's a clever take on Nirvana.
Yeah, I think of the album arts that either ape a specific album cover or an artist. I think Bad Hair Day and Alapalooza are stronger examples of that than Off the Deep End, which was also how I was kind of analyzing these as I went through.
Now, I will say, in your defense, Dave, Off the Deep End did make my honorable mentions list.
Here's my thing is like I'm looking at these just as somebody looking at the covers. I'm not nitpicking on except for Poodle Hat. You know, is this badly photoshopped? You know, is this the wrong color? You know, could he have done this a little bit differently? You know, should he have been in, you know, a different pool? Should he have not have been, you know, chasing a donut? Should he have been chasing something else? Should he have been a little more risque with, you know, his cover pose?
It's the 90s now. Go crazy.
So I'm kind of just looking at it, you know, when I look at this album, you know, especially when I look at the Off the Deep End cover album, am I instantly reminded of Nirvana's Nevermind album? There's no doubt that somebody looking at that knows that that is a parody of the Nirvana Nevermind album.
I do think it's a very affecting album cover. It does exactly what it's trying to do.
Right. It's rather than this, this cute little baby, on the cover. It is this grown naked man on the cover with a hairy chest, I should point out.
So I think what we're hearing from you is that Off the Deep End needs to make it onto the list for you.
I just think that it's such a true parody to what it is trying to parody that it needs to be on the list. UHF, I think, even though I think that, kind of one of the reasons why I put UHF where I did is I was thinking, if I were to get a tattoo of any album cover, which one would I want? And I think that just the UHF, the way that just it's colorful, it's big image of Al's head would make a great, back piece or something like that.
I do love the UHF cover.
Let me put out this proposal. Dave, you feel very strongly about Off the Deep End.
I do.
I would be willing to put Off the Deep End in our top 5 if the final spot goes to self-titled Weird Al.
I think I'm ready to concede the UHF album, and I think part of that was Kelly's argument that it really wasn't drawn to be an album cover. It's just basically the movie poster shrunk down into, a 12 by 12 vinyl cover.
I'm feeling guilty as you bring my own rule against me. It's definitely the #1 Weird Al movie poster, though.
That's true. That's true.
So there's that.
We agree, definitively.
That would be a very short episode.
So, Dave and Kelly, if you guys agree with my proposal, Off the Deep End makes it if Weird Al self-titled makes it, and that rounds out what our top 5 albums are, and then we just have to choose the order.
All right, so if that's the case, then I would be giving up In 3D, which is my #1 spot. Kelly would be giving up Polka Party, which is her #2 spot, and you would be giving up Dare to Be Stupid, which is your #2 spot.
And Poodle Hat, which was my #5 spot, with UH Jeff on the cover. Our friend.
Don't go there. Don't go there. Sorry, Jeff. In 3D gave me a lot of agony. It is very, very, very quintessential Al.
I mean, I would be happy to take In 3D, but then I wouldn't want Off the Deep End.
Kelly, remind me one more time. What were the issues? From an artist perspective, what were the issues that you saw with Off the Deep End and with In 3D?
Well, I don't have any artistic issues with Off the Deep End because I do think that's a flawless beat for beat parody. So I think that totally works.
Okay,
I think there's just something about
I'm interrupting. Off the Deep End is on our list. It has to be because you just said it was good before you said the bad stuff. So. That means...
Listen, I was going to say seeing Al naked is just very strange.
Okay, you got that.
So there's that. But I think it's really good at what it's trying to do.
I say it is disturbing, if you're wearing an Off the Deep End T-shirt or something, and you're walking around with a naked man on your shirt.
Actually, you do remind me. I used to travel around with my CD player and the album that I had in it, and I always had to hide my Off the Deep End because I was embarrassed by it. So thank you for bringing up that trauma.
I guess if you're having the in-laws over for the first time, you don't want a giant Off the Deep End poster hanging.
That was not the one to just lay out on top. And for In 3D, I don't know. It's so 80s. Maybe I just need to get into it. Just the ugly is beautiful kind of aesthetic of it. But I do think the typography of the Weird Al Yankovic is flawless.
Yeah, and if I was looking at Dave, your list, the most iconic one from those 3 is definitely In 3D. I mean, that is the album with Eat It on it. That is what a lot of people saw as their introduction to Weird Al. So that does add some weight to.
And I will say, we did bring it up earlier, but on this last tour, the In 3D is the one that got the reissue T-shirt.
Mm-hmm. It's so iconic that it was used in a TV show.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you guys feel about, in order to preserve each of our #1s, we don't include Off the Deep End, but we do include In 3D, and we do include Weird Al self-titled?
I like all those choices.
How do you feel about that, Dave?
So our top 5 in no order is Alpocalypse, Alapalooza, Bad Hair Day, Weird Al Yankovic in 3D, and Weird Al Yankovic, the self-titled album.
Yes, if everyone's in agreement.
I do like all of those. I'm happy with that.
I'm happy with that too.
Set.
All right, I think we've overcome our first hurdle. That is narrowing it down
Yay,
to 5.
Shake it out. Take a breather.
Oh boy.
I'm like getting hot in here.
You know, Kelly, that is a wonderful idea. I think we should just all take a nice break, order out some amazing vegan Mexican food.
This episode is brought to you in part by vegan Mexican restaurant Burrito in Troy, New York, home of the 2-pound double wrapped in a quesadilla burrito. Come on down to Burrito and Burrito your burrito. Find them at burritosquare.com and at burritosquared on Instagram. And remember, not every burrito is a burrito, but every burrito can be burritoed. How was your break, guys?
That was very impressive.
All right, so now that we're full on amazing burrito.
Oh, thank you guys for mailing it so quickly to Philadelphia.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
It was still hot and everything.
Yeah, well, we definitely had to plan ahead. I had to buy them a week ago and then mail it to Dave. And then I sent it to you via media mail, Kelly, because I wasn't going to do first class. So I had to stick some books in there. But
I mean, don't splurge.
All right, so now that we're refreshed and we've had our fill of delicious vegan Mexican food, we have the very difficult task ahead of us of getting the official order. We have the top 5 in no particular order: Alpocalypse, Alapalooza, Bad Hair Day, Weird Al Yankovic in 3D, and Weird Al Yankovic, the self-titled album. Those are our top 5 album cover arts. I vote Alpocalypse is number 1. That is my favorite, so I'm just going to put it out there. I think it should be number 1.
You're just trying to win.
There is no...
This is about winning, right?
We all win because we've selected through a very difficult process our 5 favorite, the 5 best Weird Al Yankovic album cover arts.
So of our list of what remains, which ones were top 3 items?
So Alpocalypse and Bad Hair Day both made my top 3.
And I had Alpocalypse and Weird Al Yankovic in my top 3.
And I had in 3D in my top number 1.
I think that in 3D should be number 3 because it has a 3 in the title.
That feels appropriately arbitrary.
I don't know. I just think that is such an iconic album cover that it just, if you look at that, it just screams Weird Al, right? And not just because his name is in giant block letters. But
not because it literally screams Weird Al.
Not because it literally screams Weird Al. But I just think that, looking at this, and to go back to the point, like you said, it was on the Stranger Things show. It was reissued as a T-shirt. I mean, and it was a very popular T-shirt. We saw, how many concerts did we go to, Ethan? In every concert, there was at least, a dozen people, who had bought that shirt and just changed out of whatever they were planning to wear to the Weird Al concert and wear that shirt. It had to be a bestseller on the website. It just had to be. It was just so iconic. I just think that if you look at this, it just says Weird Al Yankovic, and that is what Weird Al's about. And I think there's really no better representation of, Weird Al out of all the covers, somebody to look at it and say, oh, that's definitely just a Weird Al album. If you removed his name, and you looked at it, you would know that that was a Weird Al Yankovic album.
So since this is the only album from your top 3 on our list, I would be willing to put In 3D as number 1 if Alpocalypse is number 2.
Wow. That's a big move.
How do you feel about that, Dave?
I feel good about that. I mean, the Apocalypse cover, I don't really have a problem with it. The more I'm looking at it, it's actually a very, I said it earlier, it is a very well done cover. It's just, if you look at even if you look at the city that is being destroyed below, and you look at the little detail in the buildings that are on fire and just the way that, they're kind of crumbling and everything. It's just, you could tell that, the artists who put this together really, gave a lot of thought to it and how, he or she laid it out. So I gotta say that, it is a very good cover, and just the idea of, the Four Horsemen and replacing Al with that silly grin on his face. I think the silly grin is really what sells it.
It's really he milks it there. That's what sells it.
Kelly, will you agree to that proposal?
I think it's bold. I like bold actions. Let's do it.
All right. Our number 1 is in 3D, and our number 2 is Alpocalypse.
Wow, I'm so happy that you guys agreed with my number 1 that I almost don't care what the rest of the list looks like.
Even though we originally did not even choose it.
So, now looking at what we have remaining, we have Alpalooza, Bad Hair Day, and Weird Al Self-Titled. Weird Al Self-Titled was Kelly's number 1, but if I were making this list, I would put Bad Hair Day second. But we already agreed that Alpalooza comes before Bad Hair Day. So, with all of that, I would suggest Alpalooza is our number 3.
Now I'm looking at these being the 2 illustrated covers, which is a stronger illustration between Alapalooza and the self-titled album.
I mean, they're very different. One is more, I guess, subtle, while the other is very over the top.
You wouldn't describe the Alapalooza cover as subtle?
In comparison, I would.
I mean, looking at those two, the two, like you said, the illustrated ones, I think that what is more iconic and what is going to resonate more with people is that, that craziness that's going on with the Weird Al Yankovic cover. I know I'm, kind of contradicting myself because I put Al on my list and I did not put Weird Al Yankovic on the list. But I just think that of those two, if you put them side to side and look at them like I'm doing, I think that, just which one of those, if you remove the name like we did for In 3D, which one of those screams Weird Al Yankovic? Mm-hmm. It's definitely, the self-titled album is like, oh, that is Weird Al. He's just all about these wacky, zany things. He's got baloney stapled to the wall. He's got a disco ball hanging, from the ceiling. And then if you look at
it's such an over the top love letter to all of the songs, and for that to be the cover art for a debut album, I always thought was pretty impressive. Where somebody really gave so much thought to every element that was being included on this cover.
Right, and the fact that he wanted this Mad Magazine type of look, and he found somebody in Rogerio who could actually recreate that look, mm-hmm. And he knew, that if you think about Al's story is, from a kid, he wanted to be, an artist for Mad Magazine, and now he's didn't do the artwork for this, but basically his first album, this is what he's going to the world with, is showing that, hey, this is, my tribute to Mad Magazine, which I was brought up on. And at some point I wish I could have been an illustrator for.
So my proposal based on this is that we then rank for our bottom 3, Weird Al Yankovic, Alapalooza, and then Bad Hair Day.
I think that's the correct answer.
Yep.
Was about winning.
All right, so let's just go over it one more time to ensure that we're all in agreement.
Well, Ethan, before we go through this list, though, just remember that this is the definitive list that Kelly Phillips, Ethan, and myself came up with, that we painstakingly went through every single album. We agree that this is the list, and there is no room at all for argument from any of our listeners. Ethan, starting at number 5, what is our final list?
All right, our number 5 best Weird Al cover art is Bad Hair Day. Our number 4 best Weird Al studio album of the first 14 released in the United States, as pictured in the squeeze box, I'll say that each time, is Alpalooza. Our number 3 is Weird Al Yankovic, the self-titled album cover art. Our number 2 is Alpocalypse. And the definitive, Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, number 1 Weird Al cover art is none other than Weird Al Yankovic in 3D.
Woohoo!
I think that's a really strong list. I really do. I think we really analyzed these covers and went into a lot of detail about them. But I think it was necessary in order for us to come up with this great top 5 list.
Woohoo!
Amazingly, there are 4 albums that none of us picked.
I can't believe it. And these are all good albums.
It's true. They must just be better albums than they are featuring cover artwork that we like.
All right, so the 4 we didn't pick, well, one of them is actually on my honorable mention list, and I'm going to bring that one up, and that is Straight Out of Linwood.
Hey, that was on my honorable mentions list too.
It wasn't on mine, but I do like this cover.
I've always wanted a Linwood Letterman jacket ever since I saw this cover. And I want that Chevrolet and I want that dog. And I just want to be that cover.
The perspective on this car makes it look like an absolute spaceship.
It's really a low rider.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's a flat rider.
I do like the fact that they have this pit bull on the cover, and the pit bull's name is Doughboy. And the story behind Doughboy is that actually there was just a couple walking by with their pit bull, and Al was like, I like that pit bull. We're actually shooting like a gangsta type of, album cover. Can I use your pit bull? And they were like, sure. So I'm kind of thinking, what would this cover look like without Doughboy on it? Because Doughboy is really like iconic. He's like kind of almost the focal point of the, the album cover art.
What, is it just going to be the poodle instead?
I don't know if there was even going to be a dog. I think it was just going to be Al standing in front of the, the Chevrolet and just, being gangsta.
Yeah, the dog definitely does push it over the top.
And of course, this was going to be the album cover before we even had White and Nerdy. This was going to be it with You're Pitiful as the title track.
Oh, wow.
I think that's kind of interesting because it's like You're Pitiful is like opposite of gangsta rap, type of thing that, like White and Nerdy is, or your Ride and Dirty was, I guess, right? So it's kind of like Al is going for the exact opposite. And then when, of course, the whole Atlantic Records didn't approve the You're Pitiful parody, it was like, well, I guess I'm going to take whatever's coming next. And fortunately, it was White and Nerdy because that's such an iconic song.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems very prescient that it went this way.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like, well, I have the album cover for it already. It fits perfectly. A couple other things about this album cover is that the original license plate on this album cover originally said 27 for life, like the number 27, the number 4, and the word life. But then it was changed, and it was changed to NLY 27. Anyone know what the NLY stands for?
It, of course, stands for
Oh, yeah.
Northern Louisiana Yo-Yo.
A common mistake.
Right.
While you might think it stands for Northern Louisiana Yo-Yo, it actually stands... NLY are actually the initials for Nick and Nina Yankovic.
How cool is that they have not only the same initials, but Al thought to put that on the cover. I think that's really sweet.
That is very cute.
And of course, the 27, that's obviously a reference for 27,
right?
The Al's number. But it's also, if you think about it, it is, the abbreviation, if you use 2 for February and 7 for the 7th day of February, that is his wife Suzanne's birthday.
Whoa! I didn't know that was another 27 reference, his wife's birthday.
It's just meant to be.
I can just picture Al like dating people. He's like, what's your birthday? And then Suzanne's like, February 7th. He's like, all right, let's do it.
Finally. In 7 years, it's going to be quite an event.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
You have to re-up their vows.
Yeah. 27 times in a row.
We're going to have a very special episode for that episode.
And so I don't know if you guys knew this, but originally the picture on the back of the cover was Al's first choice for the album cover, and it did not end up getting chosen.
Wow, take that, Al.
I'm really glad that they used what they did. I think it's so cool. It really, it's perfect.
It's definitely like the straightest cover.
Yeah. Like
which is very funny.
If it didn't have Weird Al in giant letters and you weren't really paying attention, I feel like you could mistake this for someone else.
Yeah, because there's not any really like little background details or any little hidden jokes or anything. It's just a very straightforward cover that happens to be about Weird Al.
So my understanding is that while this album is called Straight Out of Linwood, that wall that's used there, that's an actual wall that they use with all that graffiti on it. It's not actually located in Linwood itself. It's located in one of the neighboring towns. So while the album is saying Al is straight out of Linwood, and technically he is, the actual album cover was not shot in Linwood.
I guess that's the outer.
That's the outer part.
The outer Linwood.
Okay, so the next album that did not make any of our top 5 lists is, of course, Even Worse.
This is another just very straightforward album cover.
I mean, there's really not a lot to it, but if you stack it up against Michael Jackson's album Bad and you put them side by side, the attention to detail, like just the pose that Al's in, the exact same pose that Michael Jackson's in, like everything is like, even down to like, there's this little curl that like kind of like is a little bit out of place on Michael Jackson, and it's the same curl and it's out of place on Al. So just like how much attention to detail he put into just to make this look as close to Michael Jackson's as possible. Like we were talking about, how Alapalooza was getting confused with Jurassic Park. Like this is one that I could see like somebody picking up going, oh, Michael Jackson's new album, and coming home with Even Worse.
Totally.
And Ethan, in a weird hand position history, he goes out of his way to recreate that odd little 1 and 3 finger business
that Michael Jackson also is doing. So I feel very strongly that was your unintentional inspiration.
It was extremely intentional.
Intentionally unintentional.
Sure.
Well, then just let our listeners know that I'm actually doing a hand pose from a Weird Al Yankovic album, and Ethan is doing a hand pose from a Michael Jackson album. So which of us is the bigger?
He's doing a hand pose that's a recreation of a Michael Jackson cover.
Mine is still on a Weird Al album cover. Yours just happens to be the number 1 Weird Al album cover art of all time, and mine just happens to be one that none of us picked.
Probably not a coincidence.
All right, moving on to the next album cover art that none of us picked is the most recent album cover, of course, Mandatory Fun.
Yeah, I kind of like this one, even though it didn't make any of my lists. But I do like that kind of military theme to it. It's kind of like very like, communist propaganda type of look. And Ali really did a good job.
Yeah, I do think this is a really effective cover for what it's trying to communicate. Like it's very obviously trying to go for like the communist propaganda vibe. I like that it has some illustration on it for the first time since, I think, Alapalooza.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think some of the interior images are more fun, but this is probably the most cover-worthy image that they could have pulled from.
Yeah, that's true. I love the pollution coming out in the back, too. Just like...
It's grim.
I love with the Mandatory World Tour how they had made this album art into a video for the commercials, and you can see the marching and the black and white footage, and the screen would flicker and you'd see Al and you'd see the the flags, and I thought that was really cool. I like the animated version of this cover. I would say
it made for some really effective like all over branding for that whole tour.
Yes.
So it was a cool aesthetic that they got to bring through the whole thing.
I do like a lot of like those, propaganda poster spoofs that are on the inside. The one I particularly like is the one that Al is holding the wrench in his hand, and there's Chinese lettering underneath. And if you actually do the translation on that Chinese lettering, it is "I'm not wearing underwear," which I think is hilarious.
I never translated that. I love that. Thank you for doing that, Dave.
I think it would be personally, how people get like Chinese, tattoos on them, and and they find out like later on that they mean something totally different than what they think they are. Like, I would think this would be just a really funny tattoo to get, then somebody who speaks Chinese would read it and they'd be like, this guy got like "I'm not wearing underwear" tattooed. I'm like, no, I intentionally did that. It's a Weird Al reference.
That would be an incredible like incognito Weird Al tattoo. Dave, I nominate you.
Yeah, I mean, if I ever get a Chinese tattoo, it is definitely going to be the Chinese translation for "I'm not wearing underwear."
You should get it on your butt. I think that's the best place.
Yeah, it feels like something that should run down the side of your thigh.
If you can read this, I'm not wearing underwear.
Your wife's gonna love it.
Yeah, and your co-host. Anyway, let us talk about the final album cover art that did not make any of our lists. Of course, Running with Scissors.
This is such an important album for me, but what has always driven me crazy about this cover is why is it a photo on top of another photo?
Everything you just said, copy, paste. That's my feeling.
I think you were reading my notes because that's like exactly what I have in there. I don't understand why they cropped the photo the way they did. The only thing I can think of is like maybe there was something off to the side that they needed to crop out, like like a gym bag or something like that, or like Ruben's jockstrap or something. I don't know, but just something off to the side.
Keep that one though. Or it's like this was so telephotoed in that this is truly the edge of the image.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen or heard an explanation for this. I always assumed that there must be a reason. It must be a parody of something. I don't know. I really don't know. I know when the tour came around, they had the T-shirt, but it just had the main image, not the background image. Mm-hmm. And that looked great. So I don't know why they couldn't have just put like some kind of other background, or I don't know.
This is baffling. It's like when you're trying to put portrait mode photos on Instagram, you get like that little weird version of your picture in the background. They were just having this problem like 20 years before Instagram existed.
Right, or you're watching old TV shows in HD and they have those little bars on the
sidebars. But just the show's logo the whole time.
We shot this in regular film and now we're going to turn it into HD film. But, I mean, like, you would look at it and it almost looks like it was designed for a cassette tape.
Right.
However, but if you actually look at the cassette tape cover, it still has that image on the side. So that's like the only thing I could think of. Oh, was designed for a cassette. And it's like, nope. When you look at the cassette, it's still got that little side piece of the track over there. So
we need to track down the person who did this cover.
Yeah, who is the graphic designer on this album?
The name I have for it is Doug Haverty, so we're going to have to look into tracking him down.
We're going to have to ask Doug. Yes. And he did a lot of work on Al covers and photos and stuff.
I do feel like he was probably given this photo with no answer and had to come up with this creative solution. And it was good enough.
A couple things about this album, though. This is the first album, chronologically, to include the number 27 on the cover.
Oh. Mm-hmm. And the first one since Al had, of course, his image change and lost the glasses.
That's true.
Therefore, he's now more susceptible to damage by running with scissors.
Yeah, he no longer has protective eyewear.
Or protective lip wear.
Mustache hairs.
There is one more piece of trivia. I'm going to see if you guys can figure it out. This is about running with scissors on the actual album cover art. What else is special about it? I know there's not a lot to it, but there's some little special aspect to it.
Well, there are two other little runners in the background.
Kelly, you got it. Those two other runners were actually band members, so this makes the only album cover that features band members on it.
Aww. And they're front and center and definitely not covered by words or anything.
No. So don't say Al never puts his band members on the cover.
Well, so the other piece of trivia is this is the first album since Al lost his right leg. If you do look very carefully, you can see a little bit of shoe and, of course, the shadow. He did not lose his right leg.
I mean, we won't know that until Straight Outta Linwood.
That's
because
true.
if you look at the Poodle Hat cover, his right leg is pretty obscured.
That's
So
true.
it took him a few years to grow it back, but it came in stronger than ever.
We're going to have to look into that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the only other piece of trivia that I have about the Running with Scissors album is that was actually shot at the Santa Monica City College on the running track that was there.
Ooh, I want to go there now. On an pilgrimage.
Bring some scissors.
We should make a pilgrimage out there so we can find the running track from, Santa Monica City College, and we can also find that wall with all the graffiti on it, and we can do our own Straight Outta Linwood cover art.
We should do our own Running with Scissors art, but we should not have the two weird photo layering thing. Let's do it right this time.
Or, counterpoint, you should layer even more photos.
We'll do both.
Just a real mosaic approach.
And Kelly, we want you to be blurry and up and covered by letters if you would join us.
Yeah, you can Photoshop me in. I'll cut my right leg off at the knee.
Excellent.
I'm going all in.
Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We are looking forward to that picture that you're going to draw of us from behind. Remember, my arms are not hairy. I will be happy to send you as many pictures of my arms as you want for reference.
When I wake up tomorrow with my inbox littered with arm photos.
And of course, Kelly, you are the incredible artist behind the cover art for Weird Al Seriously, the brand new book by Lily Hirsch, available March 15th, but available for pre-order right now. You can check out the book from Roman and Littlefield or pre-order on Amazon.com.
And do not forget to check out Kelly and Claire with their amazing project, Dirty Diamonds.
Yeah, that's our all-girl comic anthology with our 10th and final issue coming out this spring or summer around the theme of death. And you can learn all about that and grab a copy at dirtydiamonds.net.
Oh, how appropriate. Death. That is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That is the horse on the right, the death horse.
So glad I finally squeezed a Weird Al reference into a Dirty Diamonds project.
And Kelly, we can check out your personal art and follow your personal drawings by heading over to kellyphillips.net. We can check out Weird Me, your Weird Al book, all about your obsession and love of Weird Al, and so much more by heading over to kellyphillips.net.
Yeah, and you can check me out anywhere on social media at Kelly P Comics. I post a lot about my cats and lately the movie Cats, because I just saw that and my brain is warped.
Oh boy.
I'm always glad to be here. Thank you for letting me curse you again. Not sorry. Always a treat talking to you boys.
Once again, thank you so much to our good friend and amazingly talented artist, Kelly Phillips. You can find her online at kellyphillips.net and dirtydiamonds.net. And of course, if you head over to her personal website, you can get that amazing book she wrote, Weird Me. You can get some cool pins, stickers, tattoos. She makes some really cool Weird Al stuff. Go support her. She's a great friend.
Speaking of great friends, Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast is brought to you in part by the Don Ferlazzo Allstate Agency in Clifton Park, New York. If you drive like crazy or are about to buy you a condo, Don Ferlazzo and his team can help you with crazy good auto, home, and renter's insurance. Plus, the Ferlazzo Agency can protect all of your favorite stuff, like your number one favorite Weird Al cover art album, Weird Al Yankovic in 3D.
You may think your insurance is good enough for now, but don't wait one more minute. Find the Ferlazzo Allstate on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or call 518-278-3543 for a free quote today. The Ferlazzo Agency. We sell insurance, and that's all.
And please make sure when you call the Ferlazzo Agency, you are calling them at their number and not on our special hotline 347 Spatula. If you mix up those two numbers, you will confuse Ethan and myself because we will not be able to get you renter's insurance at all.
Of course, each week we bring you amazing content like our top 5 list and interview with Kelly Phillips, absolutely free. We don't ask much from you in return. All we ask is if you enjoy the podcast and you want us to keep making more quality weekly podcasts for your entertainment, we would love if you'd support us over at patreon.com/2000inch. All it takes is as little as $1 a month, and it really makes a big difference for us.
I mean, $1 a month, that's like a cup of coffee, I think. I have no idea. I don't drink coffee. Maybe it's a cup of coffee. I don't know.
I feel like coffee's more than $1. Depends where you get the coffee from.
But so for one day, you can give us $1 a month and skip half a cup of coffee. Just order the small size.
Another way to support the podcast is by visiting our official Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast shop. You can head over to shop.2000inch.com to get everything from tote bags to t-shirts to pillows. I can't believe it, Dave. There's too much stuff there. We need to buy it all.
A huge thank you to all of our listeners, to all of our subscribers, and everyone who follows us. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram at 2000inch. We want to hear your top 5 lists. We want to hear what you think the top 5 Weird Al Yankovic album cover arts are. Let us know what we got right. And in the off chance that we happen to have something where we missed something on our list, let us know that as well. Of course, thank you to everyone who joined us on our Facebook group. And of course, an extra special thank you to each and every one of our Patreon supporters. You can support us over at Patreon at patreon.com/2000inch.
And while you're on the internet, be sure to find us online at 2000inch.com. Share our posts, tell your friends, leave us messages at 347 Spatula. Our podcast hotline is open 27 hours a day.
Do us a favor, subscribe over on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or the podcast app of your choice. This is the only way to ensure that you will not miss a single episode the moment that they drop.
Dave, now that I think about it, I wonder if we should have included Peter and the Wolf in this distinction.
No, it was the top 5 Weird Al Yankovic album cover arts from Squeezebox. We went over this. I specifically asked if we could include Peter and the Wolf, and you said that it has to be the top 5 albums.
That was Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 45-inch.
I am wearing underwear.